talk about St. Mary Goretti, Alessandro Serenelli, the event, the time, the murder on July 5th, 1902, the reasons to fall to sin of Alessandro, and his conversion and rise in Christ. So before we begin, I just want to say thank you to St. Agnes for hosting the Goretti Group every first Friday of the month. It's serendipitous that we're having a talk about St. Mary Goretti at St. Agnes because in 1910, 37 years before St. Mary Goretti was beatified, Pope St. Pius X exalted Maria as a new St. Agnes, a Virgin Martyr. And Pope Pius XII, the one who beatified her, called her Little and Sweet Martyr of Purity. So our talk for today is about Alessandro Serenelli, the murderer who later on became a friend of St. Mary Goretti, and it's a story about forgiveness and his conversion. So Jesus told Sister Faustina that the greater the sinner, the greater the right he has to find mercy. So that's in the diary of Sister Faustina. The truth is that we're all sinners, yet we're all called to be saints. Mother Angelica always starts her talk by reminding us that all of us are called to be saints. That's our entire reason of his existence, to love God, to bring his love to others, and to eventually meet him in heaven. If you want to go to heaven, then whether you like it or not, what you want to be is to become a saint. But sin is sin. So every saint has a past, and every sinner has a future. Some have more checkered lives than others, but sin is still sin. And in Romans 3, verse 23, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. So how many times have we sinned today through our actions and our thoughts? Some might not have stolen, but we committed. Some might not have fornicated, but we lusted. Some might not have taken a life, but we have hated in our hearts. We are not unlike Alessandro Serenelli, the murderer of a martyr, the murderer of St. Mary Goretti. He was a sinner, and so are we. The only difference is his sin was public and ours remained private. So why is Alessandro's story relevant to our times? He is an example to us all, especially to those who have committed serious sin. In Romans 5, verse 20, where sin increased, grace overflowed all the more. And the good thing about God is, if we think that our sin eclipses his mercy, that is all a lie. Because the devil convinces us before we sin that it is not a sin. And then after we sin, he convinces us that our sin is too great to receive God's mercy. The truth is, God cannot be outdone by evil. He will give us his superabundant grace. All we have to do is we have to repent, we have to make amends, and we have to accept God's mercy and love. St. Luke reminds us that many sins are forgiven her, for she has loved much. It seems simplistic, but really love is the answer. Because God is love, and love is God. That is his nature, and he cannot stop loving us. And in 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 8, we are reminded that love covers a multitude of sins. That is why love is so important. Because as long as we love, as long as we reach for God, God will reach for us, and his love will cover all of our sins, our iniquities. For us to know who Alessandro Serenelli was, this man who upon the beatification of Maria Goretti, Pope Pius XII called him not a murderer, but a repentant and rehabilitated man. He was also described by the Capuchins who he lived with until his death as a true son of St. Francis. And he was later introduced by Mama Assunta, the mother of Maria Goretti, to her relatives. as this is a man who opened the door to heaven to your Aunt Maria. Thanks to him, he is now blessed. A repentant, rehabilitated man, a true son of St. Francis, a gentleman who opened the door to heaven for a saint. It's such a 180 degree from a murderer to this kind of man. How can that have happened? What we have to do now is we have to go back to the beginning. We have to know who Saint Maria Goretti was, to know who was the man that she forgave and who she desired to be with heaven with her. There's a letter written by Saint John Paul II to the Bishop of Albano on the centenary death of the Saint Maria Goretti on July 6, 2002. That's your feast day. In the heroic testimony of Saint Maria Goretti, her forgiveness of the man who killed her, and her desire to be able to meet him one day in heaven deserves special attention. So who is Maria Goretti? So she was born on October 16, 1890. Her parents were Luigi, an army veteran, and Assunta, a peasant orphan in infancy. She was the second oldest of 6 surviving children, the eldest girl. And for us to know who Maria Goretti was, it's best for us to hear the words of someone who lived with her for almost 3.5 years of her life. None other than Alessandro, the one who took her life. So Alessandro described her as, she was modest. I had a lot of respect for her due to how proper she was. She always went to mass willingly, even at times where it required 2 hours of walking. She had a special devotion to Our Lady, often at home with a rosary in her hand. Maria had ordinary features and did not attract attention to herself. She had blonde hair, knotted at the nape of her neck, brown eyes, and a full face. I noticed her candor, her innate goodness. Maria was shy and reserved, especially in the presence of strangers. Later, she would consider me an older brother, showing me a sincere and pure affection that I betrayed on that awful day. So originally, the Gorettis and the Serenellis did not know each other. The Gorettis originally lived in picturesque Coronado in Italy, and they had to move to Coleghe in Turco in 1896 when Maria was 6 years old for better opportunities. Her uncle, Luigi's brother Sante, had also come with his family. But unfortunately, after a short moment, her uncle decided to leave with her family and go back home. And now her father had no other choice, but he needed to work with another man. And this is where the Serenellis met the Gorettis. The landowner, who the Gorettis and the Serenellis, suggested that both families work and live together. So they would have to live under the same roof, share meals together, as if they were an extended family. It started to work out. Unfortunately, the elder Serenelli, Giovanni, he had a bit of a temper problem, and he blew up at the landlord, who immediately kicked out not just the Serenellis, but the Gorettis as well. And now they had no other choice but to move to the Pontine Marshes to work as sharecroppers for another landowner. Unfortunately, only the desperate come to the marshes to work, because this area was prone not only to flooding, but due to the prevalence of malaria. A few days after the baptism of his last child, his 6th child, Luigi, contracted malaria, meningitis, and pneumonia. He died on the 6th of May, 1900, and Maria was only 8 years old. And it showed that her maturity, her Christian maturity, showed when she was consoling her mother, and she said, "Mama, do not be discouraged. You can take Papa's place in the field work, and I will work after the household duties. God will not abandon us. You will see, and we will get by." Before Luigi passed away, he told his wife to go back home to Coronado. Unfortunately, she decided to stay. Now, who is Alessandro Serenelli? He was born on the 2nd of June, 1882. He was 8 years older than Maria Goretti. His family came from Paterno, and he was the last of 8 siblings. His father, Giovanni, was overbearing, an alcoholic, and intolerant of any authority. He also had a difficult time keeping his job. While his mother, Cecilia, had mental illness and died at a psychiatric hospital when he was a child. So he never knew his mother, and he had no memories of her. His brother, Pietro, had a wife called Maria also. She tried to fill the maternal gap that was left by Cecilia's death, but it was not enough. And at 12 years old, Alessandro decided to work at sea with his brother. At 15, with the urging of the same brother, he left his vagabond life at sea and went to join his father to come to his aid. And at 16, he met the 9-year-old Maria Goretti, and from there on, their lives would forever be intertwined. It now became their story. So Alessandro lived under the same roof with Marietta and her family for about 3.5 years. After the death of Luigi Goretti, the dynamic between the Serenellis and the Gorettis turned for the worse. The Elder Serenelli made multiple indecent proposals to Assunta, which he refused. He took control of the pantry, of the food and supplies, and sold supplies and kept the money to himself. While Alessandro tried 2 times to violate Marietta, once in the field and the other inside her home, while the adults were working outside. In both occurrences, Marietta was able to free herself. Alessandro later admitted, "In attacking Maria's modesty, I had no other purpose than carnal release. I did not find her attractive, nor did she ever lead me on. So she was so uninfluential over me, yet I never gave up the desire to achieve my goal. After the second attempt, I conceived the idea of killing her if she continued to oppose my desires." So, Saint Maria Goretti, from the description of Alessandro Serenelli, she had purity of heart, she had virtue of chastity, and she had mercy. On July 5th, 1902, Assunta and her sons, with Alessandro and his father Giovanni, they were threshing the fava beans with the buggy and putting them into bags. When Giovanni took a short break at the bottom of the stairs, Alessandro went up the stairs, and here Alessandro described what happened next. "I took a sharp awl. An awl is like an ice pick. It's very sharp. It's very long. It's very sharp with edges, and then blunt at the tip. They use it as a way to make holes on wood or to pick on the ice. So I took a sharp awl and laid it on the external right corner of the cover of a chest, just inside the kitchen to the right. I grabbed her roughly by the arm. I dragged her into the kitchen. She realized immediately that I wanted to repeat the same advance as on 2 previous occasions and told me, no, God does not want this. If you do this, you will go to hell." I became enraged and grabbed the awl. I started striking her on the stomach, as you do when beating corn. I remember well that when I lifted Maria's clothes, she struggled to cover herself. She kept on doing this while shouting, "What are you doing, Alessandro? You'll go to hell." I left her while she was still struggling, but I knew I had struck her mortally. I went into my room, I shut myself, and climbed on the bed. Alessandro struck Maria Goretti 14 times. Marietta dragged herself to the door and called out in a weak voice to the Elder Serenelli, Come up here, Alessandro tried to kill me." The Elder Serenelli, Mama Assunta, their neighbors, the Emanuelis, went to the aid of Marietta. Giovanni Serenelli could not accept that it was his Alessandro that did this. He continued to stammer, "She says my Alessandro tried to kill her. But my Alessandro is not even here. It must have been Asunta's Alessandro. As Marietta's wounds were being bandaged by her friend, Clarissa, she kept on repeating, "Alessandro, how sad you are. You are going to hell." Marietta was placed in a horse-drawn ambulance to Noteno, while Alessandro was shackled between two policemen, also to Noteno. Given Marietta's condition, anesthesia could not be administered. According to her doctors who operated her, she prayed to Our Lady during the operation and was very calm. Her mental faculties were always very clear. The priest was called and gave her communion, and this is how a little girl of 11 became a saint. The priest asked her if she forgave her attacker. He asked, "Marietta, do you forgive your killer?" And she said promptly, "Yes, I forgive him, and I want him close to me in heaven." Without her forgiveness, there would not be a Saint Marie Goretti. She continued to decline. She had internal hemorrhaging and developed blood poisoning. She was in and out of consciousness. In a moment of clarity, gazing towards the door, she exclaimed, "What a beautiful lady. She is so beautiful, full of light and flowers." And at 3:45 p.m. on July the 6th, 1902, Maria Goretti breathed for the last time. She was 11 years old. Saint John Paul II, on his Angelus on the feast day of Saint Maria Goretti in 2003 said, "Today, the 6th of July, we conclude the celebration of the 100th anniversary of the death of Saint Maria Goretti, little and sweet martyr of purity, as my venerable predecessor, Pius XI, defined her. What does this fragile but Christianly mature girl say to today's young people? It's wonderful. Through her life, and above all, through her heroic death, Marietta, as she was lovingly called, reminds the youth of the third millennium that true happiness demands courage and a spirit of sacrifice, refusing every compromise with evil, and having the disposition to pay personally, even with death, faithful to God and His commandments. How timely this message is. Today, pleasure, selfishness, and direct immoral actions are often exalted in the name of the false ideals of liberty and happiness. It is essential to reaffirm clearly that purity of heart and body go together, because chastity is the custodian of authentic love. Saint Maria Goretti helps all young people to experience the beauty and joy of the evangelical beatitude. Blessed are the pure of heart, for they shall see God. I entrust the youth to Mary, shining with beauty. She, who sustained Maria Goretti in her trial, helps everyone to discover the value and importance of chastity in order to build the civilization of love. So that's why Saint Maria Goretti is a saint, because of the virtues that she exemplified: purity of heart, virtue of chastity, and mercy, even in the face of death. Pope Benedict XVI, he said that without chastity, America will fall. Now, what is chastity? Chastity is not the same as modesty. Chastity is when our sexuality is ordered and we are not enslaved by our passions. Chastity allows us to make the gift of the person, and that's what Marietta did. She was able to love Alessandro and all of the people in her life because she lived and loved chastely. Now, to live a life of chastity, this is something that is very important because there's so much depression and loneliness, and I personally am touched by that. Even after, especially during COVID, even until now, it's a carryover. So how do we live a life of chastity? So there's the way to do this is to have authentic friendship, to dedicate yourself to service to others, and to live a prayerful life. Sometimes I think if only Alessandro did that, if he had good friends, which he did not have, if he served others, which he did not do, if he had a prayerful life, a sacramental life, then maybe he wouldn't have taken the life of a little girl, which he did. So Marietta, she was able to live the beatitude of blessed or pure heart because she had a pure heart. And what does that mean? It means a singular focus in God, in doing God's will. And even until death, when she was being attacked, her focus was to live God's will, to follow God's commandments. So how did Alessandro fall to sin? There's a show that I love. It's called Saints versus Scoundrels. So it's as if two people are going to two people that are similar, but end up choosing different avenues. They try to talk to each other, and this is what we're doing right now. So we've seen how Marietta was able to live a Christian life, and now we're going to see how Alessandro fell into sin. So both came from similar situations, both lost parents, both lived in poverty, both actually lived under the same roof. But why did they choose different ways? Because all of the three things Marietta had in her life. While Alessandro, he chose differently because of the 5 things that he had in his life. He lacked parental supervision. His father was an alcoholic. He was always away trying to find a job that he always lost. His mother, he never knew her. He was in the company of bad people. He was always in the streets. He was talking to people, older people, younger people, who did not live a good life. And during that time, not everyone read, but this is how tricky the devil is. God gives every one of us a gift, but the devil can never take it away, but he can corrupt it. During that time, for someone of Alessandro's background, being able to read was a rare occurrence. But he had that gift. But what happened? The devil corrupted his gift. He read good books, but he also read illicit books. And there's this one book about the murder of a little girl that kept on playing in his mind, that led to him murdering Marietta. So the thing is, what consumes us, what we consume consumes us. And that's what happened to Alessandro. He let his imagination consume him. The images that he was able to get from the reading, what he was reading, he kept on letting it play over and over and over his head until he felt powerless, but to act upon it. And the fourth one is also abandonment to feelings. Alessandro, he felt compelled, he identified more to his feelings, and which is what sometimes people do. We identify based on how we feel for the moment. But what's sad is that moment will pass, but the core of us remains the same. So it has to be the core. And what is our core? The core of us is that we are children of God. That is our identity. Our identity is not our sin. Our identity is not how we feel or how we want to feel. Our identity is the fact that we are loved and we are a child of God. And the last, the clincher of what led to Alessandro's fall is he did not have a sacramental life. Yes, his sister-in-law was able to bring him to church, that he was able to receive the sacrament of confirmation. Yes, he felt forced to pray the rosary with the Goretti at night, but he did not live it. He did not go to Mass often. He did not spend time in adoration. He did not go to confession. He knew of God, but he did not know God. And all of this created a perfect storm that led to Alessandro becoming a murderer. So the trial of Alessandro, because he confessed that he murdered Marietta. His trial lasted from October 11 to 15, 1902. And his reason was due to insanity, even though he wasn't. He thought he could get away with it because he had an insane mother and a brother that was also put in a psychiatric institution. And the second reason that he said that he murdered her was because of poverty. He felt that there was no way out, and it was the state's responsibility to feed and house him in prison. So those were the two reasons he gave to taking a life of an 11-year-old. But those were all just make-believe. The reason that he killed her was because she refused. And he was sentenced to 30 years in prison. But because he was only 20 years old, so he was older than 18, but younger than 21, he was given 30 years. But if he were older than 21, it would have been life in prison. So he was found guilty of voluntary, premeditated homicide and attempted rape with abuse of domestic relationship. And upon sentencing, the president of the court asked, Mama Asunta, the mother of Maria, do you forgive Alessandro? And without missing a beat, she said, yes, Mr. President. And there was a lot of murmurs and disapproval in the court when she said this. And what she did was, she looked at them and she said, if Jesus Christ were to do the same to us, which is true, all of us fall short of the glory of God. We do not deserve heaven. It's only because of Jesus that we can go to heaven. Sin is sin. We don't deserve it. Only God. It's His choice to give it to us. And that's why we hold on to that promise that we can go home to heaven. So out of the 30 years, 3 years were spent in solitary confinement. And this could make an ordinary man or woman insane because you had no one to talk to. A small cell, just you, 24/7, for 3 whole years. And in the last year of his solitary confinement, Alessandro had a dream. Marietta appeared in a dream to him, and one by one, she kept on giving him flowers. 1 flower for each blow that he gave her, 14 flowers in all. And by the grace of God, when Alessandro woke up, he exclaimed, now I am too saved. For surely Marietta is praying for me. She came to visit me and give me her forgiveness. In total, Alessandro served just 27 years because of good behavior. And when half his sentence was served, he was able to go to a penitentiary that allowed him to work in agriculture. And in 1910, when Alessandro was still in prison, Mama Asunta wanted to talk to him to communicate her forgiveness but she had no avenue, so she talked to the priest, her parish priest, and her parish priest spoke to a bishop, and that bishop spoke to the bishop where Alessandro was located at Prasan. And when the Bishop of Noto visited him, he asked, "Do you repent? Are you sorry for your sins?" And Alessandro said yes. And he was asked to write a letter. And in this letter, he repented his sins, and it was read to Mama Asunta, and later the priest read it to the entire village during Mass. So the conversion of Alessandro was through holy accompaniment. And that's why when people think that Saint Mary Goretti is just a saint for little ones, actually she's not. The nature of her story is violent, but also very adult. It asks us to accompany those who are around us, especially those who need forgiveness. And this is what led to Alessandro's conversion. Before he asked for pardon, he was forgiven. Because he was forgiven, he asked forgiveness. He repented, and those that visited him, the priests, the people around him, when he cried and told his story, they cried with him. They cried for Saint Mary Goretti, but they also cried for Alessandro. After 27 years, Alessandro's exterior changed, but his interior changed even the more so. So when he left after 27 years, he was only 47 years old, but he looked 70 because of hard labor. But he had the serenity, an assurance that he was forgiven by Saint Mary Goretti, and that heaven was promised to him. On 1934, Mama Asunta asked her parish priest to ask Alessandro if he could visit her, and he did. And on Christmas Eve of that year, Alessandro saw Mama Asunta face to face, and she asked for forgiveness. He asked for forgiveness, and she readily gave it to him. Within his life, after that, Mama Asunta considered him a son. And he would visit her, and she would ask the people around her, especially her relatives, to forgive Alessandra as well. Some refused. But before she died, and Alessandro visited her, she said that, "I'm so very happy because finally every one of my relatives have forgiven me." It took a while, but he was completely forgiven by her relatives. And that's something that I hope people will come to realize based on Alessandro's story. Just because we still have anger doesn't mean that we haven't forgiven. Forgiveness, like love, is a choice. And forgiveness, like love, if you continue to choose it every day, then it will grow. And one day you will realize you remember the sin, but you love the sinner. In Alessandro's early 50s, he desired the solitude of a convent. His life after prison, he felt that it was more difficult because he felt that it was just because of Marieta's popularity. He had the scarlet letter, a murderer. Wherever he went, he was known as the murderer. And he had a difficult time getting jobs, keeping jobs. He felt it was a just punishment, but still it was very difficult for him. That's why he asked the religious if he could live with them. And the Franciscan Capuchins, they were able to give him that life of solitude and abandonment. He became a gardener and later a porter. And he died on May 6, 1970, as a true son of St. Francis. He never asked to be a Franciscan, but he lived as if he was one. And in his life, he saw the hand of God. When he was 12 years old, as a sailor, God saved him from drowning, from dying, because the ship that he was supposed to be on, he chose not to because he wanted to say goodbye to his father as he was going to work. But the ship sank. Alessandro did not know how to swim. He saw it as God's hand to save him. And when he was in prison, there was a huge earthquake and a lot of people died. But God saved him. And he felt that the reason why God chose to save him is so that he could retract what he said about St. Mary Goretti during his trial. At his trial, Alessandro insisted that Marietta agreed to have a relationship with him. But if he did not retract that, then she would not become a saint. And that's why one of the reasons he felt that he was saved was so that he can bring glory to Saint Mary Goretti. Not so good as a speaker. To end our talk about Alessandro, I just want to end it with his words. He wrote his last writing to give testimony to his life, and this is what he wrote. I hope this letter that I wrote can teach others the happy lesson of avoiding evil and of always following the right path, like little children. I feel that religion, with its precepts, is not something we can live without, but rather it is the real comfort, the real strength in life, and the only safe way in every circumstance, even the most painful ones of life. That's it. Thank you. If you have any questions. Yes.
Yeah, I've seen that you picked the saint. I wanted to know why did you pick her and how did she benefit you in your life? Like, what do you see in her in your life?
The children of Fatima, Mama Mary gave them, showed them what hell looked like, and Mother Mary told them that a lot of people go to hell because of lack of chastity. That's why I feel very, I cling to Saint Maria Goretti because chastity is very difficult. It's very difficult, especially now that everything around us tries to move our passions into something that shouldn't be moved towards. It's hard for me, and I think I'm not alone. That's why I chose Maria Goretti. And Alessandro, he became a friend of Maria Goretti.
Thank you.
Two questions. First, do you think Alessandro will ever become a saint? And the second question is, how can we forgive others and yet still be, for example, friends? How can we forgive others and still be friends as well? So be like how things have been before. If we have like the standards, how can we move on with forgiveness, but we're still like we're still discontinuing friendship?
not everyone is canonized as a saint. I pray that Alessandro is a saint. Yes. Because if we truly love God, we want what He wants, which is everyone in heaven. Because every single one of us is unrepeatable, unique. We all have a mission, and you bring so much joy to God. If when you are with God, when your time comes, God will be so happy because He made the universe and everything in it just for you. So God has a very personal love for each one of us. That's how much He loves us. The way He loves me is immense, infinite. Same thing with you. So there's no scarcity. Yeah, so I pray that He's in heaven because I want everyone in heaven. Yeah. Maybe you won't be canonized. But I pray. And for forgiveness, God is dynamic. He's alive. God is love. And we are also dynamic because we are made in the image and likeness of God. So I don't think we're meant to go back to who we were because we can't go back to who we were. That's already in the past. But when we forgive, like what Alessandro did, people forgave him, but it's also his choice to accept it. If I can share something very personal, I had a very good friend, very devout Catholic, wonderful friend, someone I grew up with. He took his life. He killed himself. And one of the reasons he killed himself was because whenever he'd go to confession, it was still not enough for him. He felt that God did not forgive him. And Alessandro could have done the same. He could have acknowledged the forgiveness, but not really accepted. Sometimes I think St. Judas Iscariot, if he accepted God's mercy, then what a wonderful saint he could have been. St. Paul was a murderer. He accepted God's mercy, and he became the apostle to the Gentiles. If only Judas Iscariot believed in the mercy of God. If only people on earth, if we believe of the infinite mercy of God. And what a beautiful life we would all have here in heaven. Yes.
You kind of spoke a bit about what Maria had in terms of like family support and her upbringing, which is what Alessandro did not have. So does that suggest, what would you say that suggests to the culture that lacks today, how we could potentially like bring some of those things forward that Alessandro didn't have or Maria did? Like, how can we bring those forward and try to like beautify the culture now or improve the culture to try to bring it towards something like, you know, a better state than it is?
Thank you. I think the answer to that's why I love the story of St. Goretti and Alessandro, is because of holy accompaniment. We can't change our past. We can't wish for better parents or a better family or better circumstances, but we can change how we react to it. Like I have a friend, her niece got very sick, so she decided to pray the novena. Unfortunately, her niece passed away, but then she felt that God answered her prayer, because God always answers the prayer. Sometimes it's a yes, sometimes it's a no. But she felt that God answered her prayer in her novena, because the problem was still there, but she wasn't. God changed her heart. So we can change our past, we can change our circumstances, but we can change how we see it. God cannot be outdone. If you notice, an aunt in church asked me before to plot my life from the highs and the lows. And then when we were talking about it, I realized that my highest of highs always happens after my lowest of lows. So God cannot be outdone. So when you're at your lowest, God will make a way and throw down all of His graces, so that from your lowest, you go to your highest. Holy companion. It's hard, but that's why we're made for community. Just love each other, forgive each other. Yes.
So we were talking about how the priest before Maria Goretti passed away, how she said, "I forgive him." Did Alessandro ever know that? And also I'm curious, I guess with John Paul II, how he forgave the man who shot him. So I didn't realize that he had such a deep devotion to Maria Goretti as well. So was it around the same time that, I guess with John Paul II, after he forgave the person who shot him, did she become a saint, or were there other miracles?
So because Saint Maria Goretti was considered a virgin martyr, the miracles were waived, but there were many miracles. That's why, imagine in a span of 37 years, she became a saint because there was so much clamor. She became very popular. People started interceding for her, asking for intercession. And when the priest asked Maria Goretti if she forgave Alessandro didn't know about it. Later on, after his reign, after we repented, that's why he was able to get materials and hear about the devotion to Saint Maria Goretti.
How did he die? He died in natural cause?
Yes, he died natural causes. He was 88.
88?
88 years old.
Oh.
Imagine, until 47, he was in 27 years in prison. And then from his 50s until he was 88, he lived with the Franciscan Capuchins.
Natural cause. Nobody did anything to him.
He was considered as a true son of St. Francis by the Capuchins themselves. Yeah.
Did his relationship with his family changed after, the murder, as well as going to prison and being released? Did he still have a relationship, or did they disown him?
That's the good thing about it. His family wasn't perfect, but when he was in jail, every couple of months, his father would still visit him until his death. His sister, one of his siblings' sister, would send him money and occasional letters. And when he was released from prison, his brother, Pietro, and his family accepted him, and he lived with them. So, even though his family was imperfect, they loved each other to the best of their abilities. And there's a saying, imperfect love is still love. That's why when we feel that we're lacking, our forgiveness isn't yet there, or our love isn't there yet, we ask God to fill our imperfections. And then God will come down and fill what is lacking in us. It's in our weakness that God is made strong. So the weaker we are, the stronger God's love will be in us. is a non-profit organization. We thank Agnes for hosting us.